Hi, friend. Happy New Year. Happy 2026. If you're anything like me, holy moly, I cannot believe the year is already upon us. I've written 2025 on about 75 sheets of paper already. And people have to keep correcting me, like, that's not the right year. And I'm like, ah. So that will probably go on for the next couple weeks, I'm sure of it. But I hope that you are excited and ready and diving into this new year in full force. And if you're not, no worries, because we're going to solve that here together today. Big hi to Jeff and Rachel and Kelly and Giacomo and Jim and Dean and everybody who's here with us live. If you are new here, if you've never joined us for one of these fun live coffee chats, I promise that we're a really fun bunch here. We're nice. We play well in the sandbox. We love new friends. It's basically like a kindergarten class, minus the snacks and the milk. So lean in, get those fingers a typing, and let us know who you are, where you're coming in from. The chat is kind of where all the fun happens. So we'd love to see you say hi there. But if you are listening to this on your favorite podcast network while you walk the dog or fold the laundry or do the dishes, never fear, because Heidi and I will still include you in this conversation. If you have questions or you have things that you want to follow up about, hit us up, send us a little note, drop us a little line. We're happy to make you feel like you also have a seat at this table too, even though you might not be live with us. And I don't know if you start off New Year's like this, but I tend to start off the new year a little stressed and a little frantic, which I know is kind of the opposite because most people get stressed and frantic around the holidays. And I also do that. but then in a weird way, it's like this ebb and flow. Like I get super stressed. Then the holidays and New Year's happens. And for like a moment, there's a downgrade. And then I'm right back up and I get in these crazy, like, it's the new year. We got to clean out the closet, start a new notebook, redo all of my systems to like optimize. Like I turn into like Optimus Prime, like running around my house, trying to redo everything in my personal and professional life. And so I was looking for resources around how to not be such a stress case and how to come into this new year, maybe making friends with my stress, or at least kind of walking alongside of it instead of letting it lead me like a dog on a leash, on a choked collar as I start off the new year. So I sort of devoured all of Heidi Hanna's content all about stress and this subject. And I always try to go kind of like straight to the resource of kind of who's doing this well. And, considering Heidi is literally the executive director of the American Institute of Stress, it's like, where else does one go to figure out stress management? In addition to obviously being a LinkedIn learning instructor, and she's written 2 books and one was a New York Times bestseller and, all this great stuff. I just was like, listen, Heidi's going to make this all better. So if you're starting the year anything like me, I think you are going to be really excited to also dig in and tuck in and ask some questions with Heidi. So without further ado, wherever you are in the world, please raise your cup of caffeine and help us welcome Heidi to the chat.
Hello. Well, I have to tell you, the most stressful thing that people say about me is that I'm going to somehow get rid of people's stress. So let's just bring the bar down a little bit lower than that. I like that you said befriend my stress, or at least walk alongside it. That's my kind of language right there.
Exactly. Well, that's kind of what I got out of consuming, hours and hours of your content is just, one of the things that really stood out to me, I always like jot down these notes when I'm like reading or listening to something. And one of the things that I jot down when I was watching your content was like, stress is neither good nor bad. It just is. And I love that. It really was such like a perspective shift for me.
Yeah.
Like, totally. Do you find that a lot of people just that shift alone makes such a big difference?
Yeah, I think it does. And I think that for me, I laugh at being called a stress expert because it means you've done it for a really long time. So you're really good at it. So I consider myself good at stressing. And the thing that I tend to go back to, it sounds so cheesy. You might have heard me say this. I always cringe a little bit, but stressing is a blessing once you know how to use it. So to me, there's been so many aha moments. I mean, from the time I was little, I was diagnosed with a stress-related disorder. I'm like, well, what do you do with, I'm 12. How do I get rid of stress in my life? So, it started young, and then I went into all these different fields of nutrition and physiology and psychology and ultimately neuroscience, and trying to figure out, like, what is this stress thing? And it was wild to me that, like you, I just went straight to the experts. I'm like, who are the books that I'm reading and how do I have conversations with them? And really started putting some puzzle pieces together. I think because of how unique my experience was, I could start connecting these different patterns together and ultimately realized, stress is just an experience that we have with the circumstances of our lives. And ultimately, if we lean into it, there's energy and information there. And then we have a choice of what to do with it. Sounds much easier than it actually is. But it became a matter of curiosity, because as soon as we get curious about something, we lean into it. And the networks in the brain become more approach than avoid. And anxiety and panic and overwhelm come from our tendency to want to avoid the experiences that we're having. So I think, I unpacked that, and I've always wanted to share a simplified version of it. LinkedIn, being able to do courses with them was amazing. I just updated my courses so that there's new research and some role plays and all sorts of stuff in them. So it's been amazing to be able to get that message out. But like you said, a lot of people will say, I know what you're going to say, stress is good. And I'm like, well, you can have good stress that leads to bad outcomes, and you can have bad stress that leads to good outcomes. So it's really what we do with that energy and information.
Well, and I like really what you were saying about how stress just is.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for some reason, when I think about things like, okay, is it an adjective or is it like a noun? For me, stress was always, I associate it with a feeling. So
Yes.
just like you'd say, I feel happy, or I feel sad, or I feel jealous. I feel stressed. And what I thought was really interesting was you sort of said, take it out of that category.
Yeah.
So it's not a feeling like jealousy or happy, sad, take it out of the feeling category, and instead sort of put it into this really, I don't want to say binary, but it's a demand and capacity issue. Yes. So it's like, someone who wants to buy a lot of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, but like there's no jelly at the grocery store. So stress is really just, there's something that's demanding a lot of your time, chores, buying presents for the holiday, whatever. And the scarcity part is your time or kind of the hours that you have to do that. And I'm curious, for the people that you work with, both at the Institute and, on a corporate level, doing podcasts and keynote speeches and whatnot, what do you find that in the corporate setting, a lot of people are missing from that equation? Is it mostly a time issue?
So I did a survey probably 10 years ago because I was curious, what's the thing that causes people the most stress? I had 80,000 people actually respond to the survey. So it was really interesting for me. And I looked at basic things like commute time, nutrition, physical activity, sleep, all of those things. And by far, the number one was the feeling that there's not enough time to get it all done. Now, again, it's a feeling. So if we go back to the feeling thing, I always use this analogy, and probably not everyone can relate to this like I can, but I used to say, I feel fat today. Well, fat's not a feeling, but I'm like, I knew what I meant by that, right? I was like, I feel bloated, I feel heavy, I feel whatever. But there's something under the core of that. So even with that statement, do I feel not good enough? Do I feel too much? Like, what's the value? What is it that's really at stake here? And I think the same with stress. Everyone says it. We all assume we know what that means, but it doesn't give us any power to do something with the sensation. So I would say more than anything, stress is a sensation that we have. It's so core is as a sensation that we start to label it, and we often mislabel it as it's other people. It's that I don't have enough time. And so the demand capacity thing for me changed everything, because now I can look at which one is it. It's usually both. So within that, which one do I have an element of control? So if it's completely out of our control, all we can do is build our capacity. We can get better sleep. We can go for a walk. We can have a nice cup of tea. I've got my orange tabby cat sitting next to me. I can pet him a few times and then, kind of recharge our own battery, because the demand is a lot. And oftentimes we can't minimize that. But we also have to look at that, because most people are trying to get done way more than is humanly possible in 24 hours if we were never sleeping. So at some point, we have to take a step back and say, what is it I'm trying to accomplish? And I would say even more so with entrepreneurs, or I work a lot with financial advisors who are kind of running their own business, even if they're in an organization, because it never goes away. There's always more we could do. So a big aha I had at one point was, I really am never going to get it all done. So deal with it. And I put a Post-it note on the computer. It said, you're not getting it all done today, deal with it. And so it was an element of humor and acceptance that I started creating an enough list. So once my enough list was done, if I wanted to do more, I could. But if I also wanted to do something fun, I could do that, because it's one of the things I've noticed the biggest change in my life has been building in more time and space for play and fun and relationships. I had a life that was on the road 24/7, had lots of followers, but no one to pick me up if I got stranded on the side of a road. And I was like, this, lack of human connection is really wearing away at our capacity. So it's one of the things I always encourage people is like, don't go to networking events for work networking. Go to a golf event, a painting class, something that fills you up. And by the way, those relationships that you're going to create can be really good for your business too.
Well, and I also think it's one of those things where I'm a firm believer in that the good ideas, the crazy, amazing breakthrough ideas, or the solutions to your problems, any friend that I talk to, whether they are in corporate or entrepreneurship or whatever, has always said the most random things like, oh, the solution came to me in the shower, or the solution came to me while I was walking my dog, or while I was driving to pick up my kids from school. And it's because in those situations, you have sort of like a clear mind or an open channel, and kind of in the background, your brain is untying the knot, so to speak. And until you give yourself that freedom, whether it's golf or painting or walking the dog or whatever, it's one of those things where it's like the more you kind of stare at the knot and try to tug at it, the tighter it gets. Whereas if you just kind of leave it alone, your brain is smart. Your brain knows what to do. It kind of like, give it a second, ignore it for a little bit, go do something else, take your mind off of it. And a lot of times that knot will undo itself.
Yeah. And that's, it's in the relaxation response, which is the opposite of the stress response. So we have both of those, and they're supposed to work in tandem. So like what you were saying about the holidays, we get this stress buildup, everything, and you'll remember this from the courses, everything is supposed to oscillate. Everything goes up and down. So even if you're really passionate about your work, which I would go to a speaking engagement, which by the way is like my biggest fear other than flying. And I go do this, and there was this buildup, and then I'm connecting with people and it's amazing and they're clapping. And then 3 days later, I could not get off the couch and I'd have to do it all over again.
Right.
And then I started to realize like that 3 days later is when I'm going to go get a massage, spend some time in nature. That's the only way I'm going to be able to keep going at this high passion level. So it's not that that's bad, right? Like good stress is a real thing. Holidays, vacations are exhausting, right? Because there's so much buildup, and then you're trying to be in the moment, and then you come back to stuff to do. And so it's, I think, learning to ride the waves of energy and emotion, and being a lot more self-compassionate for those downtimes. Like I would tell myself all the time, happy people get sad too. This doesn't mean I'm depressed. It doesn't mean I need medication. Like there's plenty of stuff to be sad about, but they can coexist. We can be tired and excited. We can be grieving and still finding joy in life. And I think we often feel guilty, like I need to linger in the negative to appreciate it. There's a lot of stuff going on right now. We have to be very careful we don't get sucked down that hole and realize there's still a lot of good in life. And our brain needs to be reminded of that because it is a pattern recognition machine. So if it's seeing a pattern and all we're doing is watching the news and doom scrolling, that's our reality. But if we're building in, goodness, and it doesn't have to be the woo-woo stuff. People always think I'm going to come in and be like the woo-woo person. I'm like, well, I like that stuff, but it doesn't have to be that. It could be listening to good music or, watching a funny video. I'm a huge, huge fan and advocate of healthy humor. It changes the way that the brain processes things. And anytime we get into that relaxed state, we make better connections. The neurons work better together. So I'm a big fan of prescribing massage. I think everyone should get a massage at least once a week. That is one thing people take away. They're like, I've been doing it because you gave me permission. But it's like, why do we need permission? Why can't we just say that taking care of myself is taking care of my business? It really is.
Well, I love that. Just really thinking about it like two sides of a coin, that there is, you can have the happy with the sad, and it doesn't have to be one or the other, or as Heather cleverly put it, that if you spell stress backwards, it's desserts, which is also true. Sometimes instead of just, I know for me, I'll just speak for myself. Sometimes when I'm particularly stressed at a certain moment of the day, or I'm just feeling overwhelmed, I work from home. I will get in my car and I will go and get like a little sweet treat from this little coffee place that's like a 3-minute drive from my house. But I'll go get a little matcha and a little croissant and I will eat it and I will come back and I will be like, okay, we've had our grown-up snack time and now we will.
Which is actually, so that's a brilliant example. So I'm going to give you kudos on this one. You're going somewhere, you're changing your environment, you're getting something you really enjoy. And not that this is the key to everything, but there's moderation in it, right? Like you had a serving and you enjoy it and you sit in that space and we have to, nourish and reward ourselves. Very different from people I know who I won't mention by name, who instead open a bag of potato chips, sit in front of the TV, and they're stuck on the couch for the rest of the night. So, and they think, well, this is better. I'm not taking time, or they stay and they keep working and they're, mindlessly doing things. If we just take a break and make a little bit better of a choice, even just changing our environment versus sitting on the couch, it can make a huge difference because again, the brain is going, oh, we're moving towards something. We're not running away from something. We're moving towards something we enjoy.
And really, just like you said, I think finding out whatever that is. So for me, it might be a snack. For you, it might be golf. For Erin, it might be painting or drawing. Just kind of finding whatever that is for you. I love this question from Dean because I feel like a lot of people might be coming into 2026 sort of having this thought as they kind of reevaluate their job and their work and whatnot. But how do you differentiate stress from sort of like my job, my day-to-day versus just sort of like, work responsibilities as a whole, the mortgages due this month, or my kid's going off to college and I have to save up for it. Is there a differentiator there? And, Dean's also asking this in terms of sports. So maybe there are some people here who also play sports or maybe have some kids that are playing sports.
Yeah, I love it. And that's become a big focus for me in my shift. I'm still doing a lot of the work that I've been doing with corporations, but I also have a background in sports psychology. And for me, and you'll hear me mention golf, I actually just got off the golf course in Orlando. That's why I was out of the office. But I was like, you know what? No one needs to know what I'm doing. I'm out of the office. And that's what I do. And played pretty well, by the way. But so in sports psychology, we learn a lot about using, and it goes back to energy, using the energy of the excitement. So technically, excitement and anxiety feel exactly the same. Two different people on a roller coaster. One feels excited about the thrill and the stomach dropping and all of that, and the other one is terrified. I would have been the second one. I would have been the terrified one. Public speaking. I've found that just the words that we use, when I start a speaking engagement, I always start by saying, I'm so grateful to be here. Now, it's true. It's a job and I'm grateful for that. I'm also terrified, but I'm not going to get up there and say, I'm terrified to be here. I label it as grateful and excited. And my brain hears me saying that and goes, oh, okay, we can use this to give a better performance or to be more engaged with the audience. So how we label things really matters. And I think that's also why in sports, we're working with two things. Number one is the mindset, the mental, what are we telling ourselves about our experience? But the other one is how do we use cues to put the body into a relaxed state? And a lot of people think relaxed is like lethargic. It's not. Golf is a great example of how the mind can get in the way of the body, because if you tighten up, the swing totally changes. And a lot of sports are like that. You've got high impact sports where maybe that aggression is good, but then you have downtime. But you have others that are more rhythmic in nature and really need to be in that flow state, focused, but relaxed. And so that's really important too. I think the same applies for work. I think I try to get people to really understand their physical body and their experience of stress in the moment. Sometimes we can pick up cues from our physical experience. And I don't want this to sound too woo-woo, but an example is a lot of times the high intensity stressors can show up more as headaches, backaches, upper body it's more lifted, whereas more chronic long-term worry tends to be more digestive related. So we can end up with actual stomach issues. And it has to do with the vagus nerve and how it all connects. So sometimes I'll ask people, well, when you say I feel stress, where are you feeling it? If it's more, that's where I tend to feel a lot of the pressure. It's up here. I need to take some action. If it's more in my gut, I might need to recharge and relax and kind of calm my body. And then to go to the first one, I don't think there's an easy way to kind of say this is what it's related to, but this is where coaching conversations, if you're talking with even a friend or a colleague and you want to help them, I call it being a stress detective, is really kind of asking the right questions of like, where are you feeling it? Is there a value that's at stake? And this showed up for me during COVID, because I was working so much in front of a computer and I started just having these horrible panic attacks. And I realized the value for me when I'm with people in person, I feed off the energy of that. And then all of a sudden we're on a screen and usually I didn't even see the other person. And I was like, had nothing. And the value was I wanted to feel like I was making a difference. I wanted to feel like I was bringing something relevant to the table. And when I couldn't get that feedback, that was where the breakdown was. And so from that, once you know what the value is that's being threatened, then you can take action towards that value specifically. So if it's, I'm worried about putting my kids through college, like what's the value? It might not be that you need to save more money. It might be that you should take your son out to dinner, just the two of you, and spend some quality time together. So it's kind of drilling that down a little bit and then figuring out what's the smallest action that's realistic for me to take that I can take right now, because that mobilizes that stuck energy.
Right. I think just figuring out a way to kind of unclog yourself in that way is super important and worth it. Whether that's if somebody said, okay, I love what you're saying, Heidi, how would I do that? Do you recommend journaling, or like, how would people figure out what that is for them?
Journaling is a great way to do it. We actually kind of self-correct through journaling, which is really interesting. We can find ourselves changing our narrative that way. And it is something I've used a lot. I personally am kind of obsessed with The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. I always recommend that to people because it's just a good training in doing morning pages, just kind of mind dumping, and then also taking yourself out on these artist dates, which is just about creativity. So getting more creativity and flow happening in the brain, I think is really powerful. I guess I'd be silly not to say take my online courses because I do walk through, and the courses online have assessments and they have guided meditations and they have examples and role plays of like how you might have a conversation like this. So that's the easiest way. And then I kind of packaged it together. I have triple A kind of process. It's so simple, it's silly to call it a process, but is to assess, appreciate, and adjust. So you assess where the stress is coming from. You appreciate that stress is a good resource for energy and information, and then you adjust one small thing. So you can ask yourself those questions, and journaling would be a great way to do that. I say I'm stressed. What does that really mean? And process through some of that.
And I feel like when you process through some of that, you can kind of see the picture a little bit more clearly, or step outside of yourself, which is really helpful. I know it's helpful for me, partially because of this question that Brendan is alluding to, because I know I certainly have it. Is there a correlation for people that are highly empathetic? Because a lot of times people that are highly empathetic, they worry about things that A, don't even concern them sometimes, or B, things that actually don't affect their lives, but maybe affects the lives of their friends or their family members. And how, obviously empathy is a great quality, and the world probably needs a little bit more of that, some might say. But how can somebody who maybe has a lot of empathy, or maybe has too many big feelings, also learn to say, okay, I'm not going to take on that stress from, this outside situation or this outside person?
Yeah, I'm so glad you highlighted this. I saw this as well, Brandon, and I actually wrote it down to make sure if we didn't cover it, we would get back to it, because it's one of my favorite topics. And an area of my personal passion and research is on stress sensitivity. And it's a term that I came up with to differentiate a little bit between highly sensitive people and empaths and what we're actually experiencing. So typically, if someone is considered an empath, they will experience other people's stress and emotions as if it were their own. So they have a hard time differentiating. And so this is kind of like one side of the spectrum where they're walking around just absorb. Highly sensitive people are more sensitive than your average bear. It's about 15 to 20% of the population are considered highly sensitive. And when I first heard that, it totally changed my life, because I'm like, there are more people like me, and I met a bunch of them, and I'm like, this is my tribe. Like, I'm not alone anymore, because the world's really set up for non-sensitive people. Quick way to know if you are highly sensitive is if you are more sensitive than most to bright lights, loud noises, crowded rooms, maybe more motion sick. On the positive, tend to be more spiritual, more engaged with nature, more creative. And there's a huge amount of research on this. I talk about this in my course, How to Manage Feeling Overwhelmed, specifically for that group. I wanted to have a place to send people from the corporate audiences I spoke to, because this would always come up of like, oh my gosh, I'm one of those, or oh my gosh, my daughter's one of those. And for most people, because there's not a good solid understanding of stress sensitivity, most people then develop anxiety and, unfortunately, substance abuse issues, and oftentimes leads to suicide. And it's very unexpected, because people will say, wow, they were so successful. But what's happening is the nervous system actually is absorbing more. And you can see this on a brain scan, that it goes deeper into the brain stem and the more primal parts of our nervous system. So ultimately, that's what caused my fainting disorder, was this highly sensitive nervous system that experienced trauma. So instead of fighting or flighting, I would freeze or faint. So the more I kind of unpacked that, the more I realized how important it was to talk about. And again, it's not everybody. We do want people to be empathetic, but there's an extreme where it can burn us out and break us down if we're constantly absorbing that. So great resources online. You can look up hsperson.com, Dr. Elaine Aron, game changer. She's got all the research. For those of you nerdy neuroscientists like me, you can see all the details of exactly what's happening. She also has some great books. The main thing I would say is, if you are stress sensitive, you really have to be disciplined about stimulation. So computer time, screen time, online games, social media, the news. I watch the news after this weekend every day for a few days. It feels like a few days. And then suddenly I'm like, I am just pissed. Like I'm walking around like sad and overwhelmed and confused and all the emotions. And so I changed up my routine and I watched a positive podcast. Doesn't mean you can't go to that. But first thing in the morning, the brain is most flexible and adaptable to take in new information. Do not go straight to your email. Don't go straight to the news. Fill it with something else that then allows you to take on some of the negative news or information in a more balanced way. And then know that if it's 24/7 news coverage, there's not a lot that's really going to be new in that. Limit it just like you would, consuming food.
Well, and I think you're right. Just kind of figuring out where nobody here is saying the news isn't important. I feel like we always end up with comments where it's like, you're so privileged, that is important. I'm like, the news is important. I'm not saying the news isn't important. Yep. I'm saying, when do you consume it? It's like people, I always say like dessert is important. We love us some ice cream, but like, when are we consuming it and how much? Are we having 5 gallons of ice cream at 8 a.m.? Maybe that's a good idea. Maybe it's not. So like, when are you doing it? I also find this point from Hiromi about meditation is also really important, because I know for me, sometimes after I do something that I know it might cause a little bit of stress, like watching the news, I will set aside time to do something that is for me, quote unquote, clearing. So whether that's meditation, whether that is a couple funny dog videos from, Instagram or something like that. So sort of like, okay, I know I'm going to go into this situation. I know it's going to cause me to, have some feelings, but what can I do afterwards? How can I kind of clear the deck, so to speak?
And again, it's oscillation. It's one of my favorite words because I always go back to that. Anything can be strategic if it's done with intention. So there is strategic napping. There is strategic wine drinking, as I heard you mention on your intro. But it's all what it's done for. What's the intention of it? And we don't want things that are going to just push the stress down. A lot of times that's where substances become problematic, is they let us get outside of ourselves temporarily, but the problems are still there. And now we feel like crap as well. So finding out a way to do that and oscillate. A flat line is always a bad sign with the human system. So we want to make sure we're getting those, nice waves.
Absolutely. And I feel like sometimes, again, we've been talking a lot about like, stepping back and kind of figuring out when things are going to happen or how you can manage it. And so I also really wanted to touch on this question from Giacomo, which is really, as some of us stepped back at the end of 2025 and really looked at not just our work, but also our personal lives, also how we were showing up as a friend or as, a partner or as a, colleague at work. So for someone who might be coming into the new year sort of very zoomed out and feeling like, okay, I know I have all these pieces to my life, my work life, my personal life, but I also know I have these big dreams, whether it's big dreams for personal or big dreams for professional. How do you help people kind of take on that responsibility and take on that goal setting, but also do it in a responsible way and realizing that there is a lot you want to accomplish or there is a lot that you want to do, but how to not overwhelm yourself with that?
Yeah, I think so much of this, I'm really fortunate to have worked with an incredible sports psychologist early in my career. And so much of it is the story that we tell ourselves about what we're doing. So I often will ask people, what's the big but that's getting in your way? And that is, I want to do this, but. So usually I want to lose weight, but, right? I want to go to bed. So we like lean into the but and go, okay, what is it? So we would do this process at the Human Performance Institute where I used to work, and we would, kind of create an old story and a new story. So the old story is I want to lose weight, but yada, yada. And then we would add a line. I want to lose weight, but, and then the reality is if I continue, this is the outcome. This is where I'm heading, to do a little bit of forecasting. Therefore, here's what I'm committing to do. So, and a lot of times the but is too big. It's not getting out of the way. And then I always tell people, I'll choose something else. Like this isn't thing for you right now because it's either not important enough or life is too chaotic. I'll have young parents say, how do I get better sleep? I'm like, you're not. Like you're just not, it's a season.
You're not.
Sometimes,
Good luck.
yeah, sometimes it's a season. Like I've really had to get more comfortable saying I'm in a slow season. I'm in a quiet season. I wrote 8 books in maybe 9 years. I mean, I was just like cranking, and I didn't even want to be a writer. I just like had all this stuff to say and wanted to get it out there and was traveling and speaking. And then I finally got to the point where I was like, I just want to be quiet for a while. I just want to listen. So it became the story I told myself about what being productive was. So I think big dreams and all of that are fabulous. My gosh, I wish I could tell my 30-year-old self how I'd be feeling at 50. It's gotten so much better, so much better. But like to know this is part of the journey and to give ourselves much more self-compassion and, talk to ourselves the way that we would talk to a good friend about where we're at right now. I don't think it's that we have lofty goals. I think it's that we beat ourselves for not being there yet. And I mean, you can hear it over and over again from motivational speakers to pastors to whomever saying like, it's the journey. So how are we experiencing the journey is what's going to matter the most, because those big goals, I can tell you my big goals, totally different from what I'm actually living, but I like what I'm living a lot better. So.
No, I think you're totally right. And just kind of leaning into what are those buts? What season of life are you in? Recognizing that you're in that season. Similarly, this question from Jeff, I think is important, because if you are in a season where you're putting yourself out there a lot. So maybe you're moving into a bigger sales role and you got a bunch of cold calls, or that you maybe just stepped into a promotion. And you're going to be in situations that are going to be stressful. Is there a tip or a hack that you give people to help them remove stress sort of in that moment? So like I'm walking into the big sales pitch, or I'm walking into the first marketing meeting of 2026 that I'm leading, since my promotion. What are some ways that someone could, I mean, obviously there's not like a one size fits all hack to this, but at least something in the moment that could help them reduce that stress.
It's so funny. I want to say, just take this supplement that I'm selling on my website for $9.99. But I can't. So there's
magic pill.
There's a magic pill. They said that once, if exercise was a pill, everyone would be taking it. And it's like, yeah. So there's 2 things I hear in that. So the first one is, if you're going into a season that is stressful, first thing that came to mind for me was minimize demand, maximize capacity. So for me, I would take kind of just an inventory of that. And there are times when I'm traveling and I'm speaking and I'm golfing and I'll have a couple glasses of wine on the plane, and I might not, go to bed at a great time, but I can tolerate that because the stress isn't super high. It's clients I've worked with. It's a golf tournament. I know people, that kind of stuff. However, there are other seasons where it's like bedtime is critical, meditation is critical, physical exercise is critical. Like, what can I do to build myself to be as strong as I can? And are there demands that I can either delegate or push off, temporarily, because it's not really urgent to what I'm doing right now? So I love, again, the demand capacity model, because we can always tweak things. And if we can take an action on each of those, that's extraordinary. In the moment, what we really want to do is circuit break stress. So what can we do in the moment when we notice that we're experiencing stress in the moment? And the routine that I started, and you could do any of these really, but I like them packaged as a 3, I call the brain recharge. So ultimately, how do I get blood flow back? Because we're not hijacking that energy and information in our gut. We're, okay, how do I deal with this? So it's BFF, like best friends forever. And it's breathe, feel, focus. So in my courses on LinkedIn, I have guided meditations like this, and I always follow that same thing. You can add tweaks to it to make it more advanced, but ultimately all meditation is that we breathe, because it gets to the base of the brain that starts that relaxation response. And yes, I realize we're breathing, but we want to breathe in a more intentional way. We don't want to force deep breathing, but about breathing into a count of about 5, out to a count of about 5, depending on how you count, just finding something natural and a little bit more full and really letting the body settle into that. So the breathing process, feeling is to activate a positive emotion. So gratitude is one of the best. If we think about something or someone that we feel grateful for, that instantly starts to allow more blood flow to the rest of the brain, so we're not stuck in that stress state. And then focus on the outcome that we want. So we breathe in our body, we feel a positive emotion and actually feel that in our body as well as a lightness. And then focus on what's the most important thing right now. And I usually tell people, in the focus, maybe play with the idea of who do I want to be in this moment instead of what do I need to do? Who do I want to be is connected, fully engaged, present, energized, maybe calm, maybe, so then we can kind of try that on. And that practice can be 30 minutes, but it could also be 3 seconds. So when I'm feeling triggered, and I still get triggered because I am highly sensitive, I will do that. I'll take maybe 3 breaths, really focusing on the exhale because that's where the relaxation happens. I'll feel a positive emotion. I'll focus on how I want to show up. And the best example I can come up with is a family member who triggers me, and it happens all the time. And I feel myself get tight because she wants things to be different, but doesn't want to do the work. And so I'm like, "Argh." And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to breathe. I feel grateful I get this time with my mom. And then I'm going to focus on just showing up because that's all she wants. She doesn't want me to fix it. And so I just practice that over and over, and it gets a little bit easier.
Well, and I love the F for feel. One of the things that I sort of practice when it comes to this is I am trying to remember where I consume this. I know it was Ram Dass, speaking of woo-woo stuff, but I can't remember if it was a podcast or one of the book. I don't know. I've consumed a lot of his stuff. But he was talking about wiggling your toes. And I've now started to do that. If I'm in a moment where I'm feeling very stressed, I sort of exactly what you said, like take a deep breath, exhale through the mouth. And I will just wiggle my toes sort of in my shoes or in my bare feet and sort of do the like, be here now. Yes. Like I'm here, I'm in my body, I'm now. But I love this idea of really kind of coming into yourself in that moment. Because a lot of times we're up here. Yeah. Instead of like in here, or at least
something I don't think I've ever told anyone other than my producers at LinkedIn Learning is I filmed all of my courses barefoot. So
yes,
but it was a grounding thing, right? It's bringing attention to the fact that we are here and we are supported, and we're not all up in woo-woo land. So yeah, I saw this as well about box breathing, and I think it's a very popular technique, works really well. It's essentially breathing in, holding for 4, breathing out for 4. I think finding a breathing practice that works for you is really important. There's a lot of them out there. So I always tell people, try different things, listen to music if that helps, listen to sounds of nature if that helps.
Well, and I love this idea of really kind of going out and finding what works for you and what does that look like. And I'm curious, like as someone who's sort of in this work day in, day out, are there people or resources that you look to for new ideas or that you're kind of searching out, whether it's like podcasts you're listening to or books you're reading or things that you're watching?
Yeah, I did a lot more of it. I used to host a global stress summit, and I was like getting to interview all my favorite people. And so I go back to a lot of those people. Robert Sapolsky has, to me, the stress Bible called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. If you want to understand stress physiology in a fun way to understand it, he's phenomenal. He also has some really good videos and lectures, depending on how kind of nerdy you want to be about it. He's got them across the spectrum. I also really love John Rady. He wrote a book a while ago called Spark, and he has several others that have come out. He talks about the impact of physical exercise on the brain. And so to me, I'm like, I've got these people in these different categories. My colleague, I used to teach a course at Harvard Extension. My colleague there, Shelley Carson, has some great books on creativity and the power of creativity in the brain. And then really my go-to, I'll be honest, right now it's a lot of golf psychology stuff. And if anyone wants a list, I can give you those. There's some great stuff that I think relates to life as well. But I read a lot about humor. And so there's like, the old things like Anatomy of an Illness, Norman Cousins, all the way to books on laughter and strategic humor, and the Comedy Bible by Judy Carter. I'm actually part of an association. This sounds really nerdy, but it's the Association for Applied and Therapeutic Humor. Does not sound funny, but we do research on the benefits of humor, on health, happiness, business production, all of those things. So I think I'm at a point now where I've realized that for the most part, I have what I need to function better when it comes to my relationship with stress. I like to hear what people are talking about. A lot of it's not new. The book I resonate with the most is actually one of the oldest I've ever read, which was Hans Selye, who started the American Institute of Stress, called The Stress of Life. And I'm reading it. I'm like, why didn't we learn this in elementary school? Like, this is exactly what I'm talking about, but it was like so long ago. So.
Oh, add it to the list. People also don't realize how to balance a checkbook. So I mean, add it to the list of things that we don't get taught in school that would probably be very, very helpful. I want to make sure we get to Erin's question before we start to wrap up here. But I think it's interesting for those of us who might be, working from home or consultants or just finding ourselves a little more isolated. Are there ways to kind of manage stress when you are sort of alone on an island and not maybe in this, very people dense, therefore, an empathetic, a lot of, conference calls and meetings and whatever, but you're a little more solo?
Yeah, this is a huge concern. And I think the first thing I would say is don't feel alone and you're feeling alone, because this is really, we're talking about a loneliness epidemic right now. And I think a lot of it is we're so hyper connected through technology that we don't have like water cooler chat anymore. A lot of people don't have commute times anymore. We're not running into Starbucks. We're making our Nespresso at home. So there's a lot of that. There can be benefits in being alone without feeling lonely. And so I try to look at that a little bit. I actually really like being alone, but I've created a space that feels very nourishing and supportive in my being alone. But if we're feeling lonely and feeling isolated, that's a very different situation. Typically, I think through, because I've dealt with this myself, of what are the ways to engage. I think finding, even outside of work, hobbies, passions of yours, community support, finding groups to connect with. This game changer for me when I moved to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, joined a couple ladies' leagues for golf. It's the biggest blessing I've had. I have better friends through golf than I had my whole entire life previously. Not to diss my other friends, but it was just the showing up, because I'm actually have a lot of social anxiety and I'm quite introverted. So I don't do a good job at just going out and chatting with people, but showing up regularly, you start to develop some of those relationships, and those can carry into your workspace. And I would say even, some of the digital platforms that we can use to engage with people, as long as we're doing it with the right intent and creating those relationships, we can feel more connected. And the last thing, and it's not always easy to do, and we feel like we're running on empty, but if we can be of service to someone else, that can really help. And even if it's just writing a thank you letter, like you had a good experience at Starbucks, like write a thank you note. It makes us feel connected to our humanity, even if we don't have a lot of people around us.
1000%. Hold a door open. Yeah. Hold an elevator, because I know normally we're all sitting there like close. Hold the open for a change. It'll make you feel better. Heidi, this has been so helpful and just so refreshing to hear a lot of these insights. I'm curious if you could give all of us a homework assignment, because like you, we're nerds, like we're into the juicy stuff. So if you could give us a homework assignment, for the weekend that would help us manage stress or deal with stress or approach our stress in a better way. It could be, again, to try something or to listen to something or do something. What would be your homework assignment that you would give to us?
Yeah. This just keeps coming back to me, and I trust that sometimes. I don't know why I'm being led in this direction, but hopefully it'll resonate with someone. I like to create a playlist, and not a playlist like music, a playlist like what would you do to play? And most people are like, I have no idea. I would journal about this. If I were going to create a playlist, meaning things I want to do for fun and nothing else, and just create the space to come up with a list and find one to do each day. It is unbelievable. This also goes back to I gave myself goosebumps. Goes back to the artist's way of taking myself on an artist's date. And I'm like, I would go, one of my favorite things to do is just go to the zoo and watch the monkeys, or go to a gemstone shop and pick out one gem. It's just stuff to do to engage in life. And then, if you've got other people in your life too, create a challenge with them and share your ideas, and you might get some good ideas from someone else, or you might even decide to go on a shared play date. Let's just do something fun and wild that we wouldn't normally do. And it really boosts our creativity. It boosts our sense of connection, and ultimately will help us with everything else that we want our brain to do to show up for us.
I love this. It's so great. It's such a fun homework assignment. And it is one of those things, whether it's the artist's way or, Elizabeth Gilbert's Big Magic, whatever it is, whatever content that you're tapping into, I think the more you can explore that play aspect and things that are new and different and exciting and not part of your sort of everyday routine, huge, huge win.
Yeah. And it would be great if we just came up with them on our own. But the reality is we need to dedicate time to actually put them down. So we're in the moment. We go, okay, what is it? Okay, that sounds good. Same with music. And I saw someone mention here, Kelly as well. It could be music too. I have a playlist for when I'm feeling down. I have one for when I need to calm down. I have one for when I want to just laugh. I think anything like that we can create as a go-to, so that in the moment when we need it, we're not stressed about trying to find something to help us with our stress. We want to just have a go-to.
1,000%. Heidi, this was so wonderful. Thank you so, so much for your time and your energy and attention. It was awesome. Where can people keep learning from you and getting amazing insights?
Well, definitely can connect on LinkedIn. It's kind of my go-to hub for, keeping in touch with people. And I think my website and everything is listed there. I don't really do a ton. I created a newsletter I was doing weekly, and then I was just having too much fun to keep writing it. So that'll probably come back at some point. But yeah, if you connect with me on LinkedIn and let me know that you're here, that would be awesome, because then I know exactly why we're connecting, that you're part of our tribe and not trying to sell me financial advice.
Exactly. Oh, not that financial advice is a great.
No, I love it. But
not in your LinkedIn inbox anymore. No more. No, Heidi, this has been so wonderful. Thank you so, so much. And thank you, Dean and Aaron and Jeff and Giacomo and Amanda and Kelly and Rachel and Brendan, and for all these amazing questions and conversations. I know that I'm going to be sinking into a lot of these resources when we wrap up. This has been amazing. If you have any follow-up questions for me and Heidi, like she said, our LinkedIn boxes are always welcome. So feel free to shoot us a note. And if you get inspired to do the homework assignment, tag Heidi and I. We would love to see how you're being creative and what sort of creative date you took yourself on as we start off 2026. That would be super duper fun. We don't have a session next week. I unfortunately have to travel for work, but we will have a session the week after that with Selena Rezvani, which is going to be super fun. So thank you so much for listening in and joining us live or tuning in on your favorite podcast network. Heidi and I hope to hear from you very, very soon. All right. Take care.